Hello, this is Morale Bernard with the continuation of the story styles. Hercule Poirot is on the scene. Yes, Poirot is here. And so, by the way, the last words were, the good times will come again, Dorcas. At least we hope so. Now, will you send Annie to me here? Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. And before I proceed, by the way, please subscribe to the channel and please share the videos. Much appreciated. Let us proceed, or let me proceed. How did you know that Mrs. Inglethorpe took sleeping powders? I asked in lively curiosity as Dorcas left the room. And about the lost key and the duplicate. One thing at a time. As to the sleeping powders, I knew by this. He suddenly produced a small cardboard box such as chemists use for powders. Where did you find it? In the washstand drawer, in Mrs. Inglethorpe's bedroom. It was number 6 of my catalogue. But I suppose as the last powder was taken 2 days ago, it is not of much importance. Probably not. But do you notice anything that strikes you as peculiar about this box? I examined it closely. No, I can't say that I do. Look at the label. I read the label carefully. 1 powder to be taken at bedtime if required. Mrs. Inglethorpe. No, I see nothing unusual. Not the fact that there is no chemist name. Ah, I exclaimed. To be sure, that is odd. Have you ever known a chemist to send out a box like that without his printed name? No, I can't say that I have. I was becoming quite excited, but Poirot damped my ardour by remarking, Yet, the explanation is quite simple. So do not intrigue yourself, my friend. An audible creaking proclaimed the approach of Annie, so I had no time to reply. Annie was a fine, strapping girl and was evidently labouring under intense excitement, mingled with a certain ghoulish enjoyment of the tragedy. Poirot came to the point at once with a business-like briskness. I sent for you, Annie, because I thought you might be able to tell me something about the letters Mrs. Inglethorpe wrote last night. How many were there? And can you tell me any of the names and addresses? Annie considered. There were 4 letters, sir. One was to Miss Howard, and one was to Mr. Wells, the lawyer, and the other 2, I don't think I remember, sir. Oh, yes, one was to Ross, the caterers in Tadminster. The other one, I don't remember. Think, urged Poirot. Annie racked her brains in vain. I'm sorry, sir, but it's clean gone. I don't think I can have noticed it. It does not matter, said Poirot, not betraying any sign of disappointment. Now, I want to ask you about something else. There is a saucepan in Mrs. Inglethorpe's room with some cocoa in it. Did she have that every night? Yes, sir. It was put in her room every evening, and she warmed it up in the night whenever she fancied it. What was it? Plain cocoa? Yes, sir. Made with milk with a teaspoonful of sugar and 2 teaspoonful of rum in it. Who took it to her room? I did, sir. Always? Yes, sir. At what time? When I went to draw the curtains, as a rule, sir. Did you bring it straight up from the kitchen then? No, sir. You see, there's not much room on the gas stove, so cook used to make it early before putting the vegetables on for supper. Then I used to bring it up and put it on the table by the swing door and take it into a room later. The swing door is in the left wing, is it not? Yes, sir. And the table, is it on this side of the door or on the farther servant side? It's this side, sir. What time did you bring it up last night? About 7:15, I should say, sir. And when did you take it into Mrs. Inglethorpe's room? When I went up to shut up, sir, about 8 o'clock. Mrs. Inglethorpe came up to bed before I'd finished. Then between 7:15 and 8 o'clock, the cocoa was standing on the table in the left wing. Yes, sir. Annie had been growing redder and redder in the face, and now she blurted out unexpectedly, "And if there was salt in it, sir, it wasn't me. I never took the salt near it." "What makes you think there was salt in it?" asked Poirot. "Was seeing it on the tray, sir." "You saw some salt on the tray?" "Yes, coarse kitchen salt, it looked. I never noticed it when I took the tray up, but when I came to take it into the mistress's room, I saw it at once, and I suppose I ought to have taken it down again and asked cook to make some fresh. But I was in a hurry because Dorcas was out, and I thought maybe the cocoa itself was all right, and the salt had only gone on the tray, so I dusted it off with my apron and took it in." I had the utmost difficulty in controlling my excitement. Unknown to herself, Annie had provided us with an important piece of evidence. How she would have gulped if she had realized that a coarse kitchen salt, astringent, one of the most deadly poisons known to man. I marvelled at Poirot's calm. His self-control was astonishing. I waited his next question with impatience, but it disappointed me. "When you went into Mrs. Inglethorpe's room, was the door leading into Miss Cynthia's room bolted?" "Oh, yes, sir, it always was. It had never been opened." "And the door into Mr. Inglethorpe's room, did you notice if that was bolted too?" Annie hesitated. "I couldn't rightly say, sir. It was shut, but I couldn't say whether it was bolted or not." "When you finally left the room, did Mrs. Inglethorpe bolt the door after you?" "No, sir, not then, but I expect she did it later. She usually did lock it at night. The door into the passage, that is." "Did you notice any candle grease on the floor when you did the room yesterday?" "Candle grease? Oh, no, sir. Mrs. Inglethorpe didn't have a candle, only a reading lamp." "Then, if there had been a large patch of candle grease on the floor, you think you would have been sure to have seen it?" "Yes, sir, and I would have taken it out with a piece of blotting paper and a hot iron." Then Poirot repeated the question he had put to Dorcas. "Did your mistress ever have a green dress?" "No, sir." "Nor a mantle, nor a cape, nor a, how do you call it, a sports coat?" "Not green, sir." "Nor anyone else in the house?" Annie reflected. No, sir. You are quite sure of that? Quite sure? Barely. That is all I want to know. Thank you very much. With a nervous giggle, Annie took herself creakingly out of the room. My pent-up excitement burst forth. "Poirot," I cried, "I congratulate you. This is a great discovery." What is a great discovery? Why, that it was the cocoa and not the coffee that was poisoned. That explains everything. Of course, it did not take effect until the early morning, since the cocoa was only drunk in the middle of the night. So you think that the cocoa, mark well what I say, Hastings, the cocoa contained strychnine? Of course. That salt on the tray, what else could it have been? It might have been salt, replied Poirot placidly. I shrugged my shoulders. If he was going to take the matter that way, it was no good arguing with him. The idea crossed my mind, not for the first time, that poor old Poirot was growing old. Privately, I thought it lucky that he had associated with him someone of a more receptive type of mind. Poirot was surveying me with quietly twinkling eyes. "You are not pleased with me, mon ami." "My dear Poirot," I said coldly, "it is not for me to dictate to you. You have a right to your own opinion, just as I have to mine." "A most admirable sentiment," remarked Poirot, rising briskly to his feet. "Now, I have finished with this room. By the way, whose is the smaller desk in the corner?" "Mr. Inglethorpe's." "Ah." He tried the roll top tentatively. Locked. But perhaps one of Mrs. Inglethorpe's keys would open it. He tried several, twisting and turning them with a practised hand, and finally, uttering an ejaculation of satisfaction, "Voila! It is not the key, but it will open it at a pinch." He slid back the roll top and ran a rapid eye over the neatly filed papers. To my surprise, he did not examine them, merely remarking approvingly as he relocked the desk. Decidedly, he's a man of method, this Mr. Inglethorpe. A man of method was, in Poirot's estimation, the highest praise that could be bestowed on any individual. I felt that my friend was not what he had been as he rambled on disconnectedly. There were no stamps in his desk, but there might have been, mon ami? There might have been. Yes. His eyes wandered around the room. This bourgeois has nothing more to tell us. It did not yield much. Only this. He pulled a crumpled envelope out of his pocket and tossed it over to me. It was rather a curious document. A plain, dirty-looking old envelope with a few words scrawled across it, apparently at random. The following is a facsimile of it. "Where did you find this?" I asked Poirot in lively curiosity. "In the waste paper basket. You recognize the handwriting?" "Yes, it is Mrs. Inglethorpe's. But what does it mean?" Poirot shrugged his shoulders. "I cannot say, but it is suggestive." A wild idea flashed across me. Was it possible that Mrs. Inglethorpe's mind was deranged? Had she some fantastic idea of demoniacal possession? And if that was so, was it not also possible that she might have taken her own life? I was about to expound these theories to Poirot when his own words distracted me. "Come," he said, "now to examine the coffee cups. My dear Poirot, what on earth is the good of that now that we know about the cocoa?" "Oh la la, that miserable cocoa," cried Poirot flippantly. He laughed with apparent enjoyment, raising his arms to heaven in mock despair, in what I could not but consider the worst possible taste. "And anyway," I said with increasing coldness, as Mrs. Inglethorpe took her coffee upstairs with her, "I do not see what you expect to find, unless you consider it likely that we shall discover a packet of strychnine on the coffee tray." Poirot was sobered at once. Come, my friend," he said, slipping his arms through mine. "Ne vous fâchez pas. Allow me to interest myself in my coffee cups, and I will respect your cocoa. There, is it a bargain?" He was so quaintly humorous that I was forced to laugh. And when we went together to the drawing-room, where the coffee cups and tray remained undisturbed, as we had left them, Poirot made me recapitulate the scene of the night before, listening very carefully, and verifying the position of the various cups. So, Mrs. Cavendish stood by the tray and poured out. Yes. Then she came across to the window where you sat with Mademoiselle Cynthia. Yes. Here are the 3 cups. And the cup on the mantelpiece, half drunk, that would be Mr. Lawrence Cavendish's. And the one on the tray? John Cavendish's. I saw him put it down there. Good. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But where, then, is the cup of Mr. Inglethorpe? He does not take coffee. Then all are accounted for. One moment, my friend. With infinite care, he took a drop or 2 from the grounds in each cup, sealing them up in separate test tubes, tasting each in turn as he did so. His physiognomy underwent a curious change, an expression gathered there that I can only describe as half puzzled and half relieved. "Bene," he said at last. "It is evident. I had an idea, but clearly I was mistaken. Yes, altogether, I was mistaken. Yes, it is strange, but no matter." And with a characteristic shrug, he dismissed whatever it was that was worrying him from his mind. I could have told him from the beginning that this obsession of his over the coffee was bound to end in a blind alley, but I restrained my tongue. After all, though he was old, Poirot had been a great man in his day. "Breakfast is ready," said John Cavendish, coming in from the hall. "You will breakfast with us, Monsieur Poirot?" Poirot acquiesced. I observed John. Already he was almost restored to his normal self. The shock of the events of the last night had upset him temporarily, but his equable poise soon swung back to the normal. He was a man of very little imagination, in sharp contrast with his brother, who had perhaps too much. Ever since the early hours of the morning, John had been hard at work, sending telegrams. One of the first had gone to Evelyn Howard, writing notices for the papers, and generally occupying himself with the melancholy duties that a death entails. "May I ask how things are proceeding?" he said. "Do your investigations point to my mother having died a natural death? Or must we prepare ourselves for the worst?" "I think, Mr. Cavendish," said Poirot gravely, "that you would do well not to buoy yourself up with any false hopes. Can you tell me the views of the other members of the family?" "My brother Lawrence is convinced that we are making a fuss over nothing. He says that everything points to its being a simple case of heart failure." "He does he? That is very interesting, murmured Poirot softly. Join me for the next video of Styles. Poirot, join me for the next video. Find out what's happening in the next video of Affairs at Style with Poirot. Join me for the next video. I'll see you then. Morel said, bye for now.